পিছনে বহুত সাউন্ড। Welcome all of you. We just had a small technical difficulty at the very beginning that I
As usual, when it's you and
live. So sorry about that, but I hope I should not be sorry because you must have enjoyed that part the best, though I have deleted it now. So today I have with me Anirban, and Anirban Choudhury, most of you. Anirban, can you just use earphone because I am listening my own feedback. So till Anirban gets little help from his headphone, we are, most of you know Anirban if you are in Kolkata, West Bengal, and also many in Assam. So
can you hear me?
Can
you hear me?
I can hear you through your sound system, not through your. And I can hear some putung.
Just a second.
Okay, so let Anirban do all those things and we can discuss. So you please prepare some of the good questions. He's a very good friend of mine and I want one of the toughest interview to be this one. So you push and give as much as toughest question, like after God, which animal can be seen to have godliness in it? So such hypothetical questions are most welcome. So Anirban, are you ready?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Clear.
Okay, so so today, as you see, the topic is on animal rescue and rehabilitation, and we can discuss many other in between things. So because Anirban has been actively dealing with animal rescue for a large or long time now, and rehabilitation as well, and in meantime we'll little bit discuss about captive breeding because he was dealing a lot with captive breeding, and I think he is still now. So before we start off, a very interesting aspect of Anirban that touches is that he is not like stereotype researcher with a research background starting from zoology or something. So that can be a source of inspiration for many of you who want to pursue line in wildlife, but think of that your background may be a hindrance. So Anirban is the person who can tell you how he started and came to the point where he is right now. So Anirban, tell something about how you started and all the encounters, all the person that you were involved at one point of time.
So actually, as you know, like Jaditha, like this kind of things like is not never perceived that it's gonna happen this way and that way. It's just that like I had a liking for animals in a broader sense, and especially reptiles. So even like when I was much younger and like I used to go through like various comic books like Tintin and all, and seeing the crocodiles and all that pictures in there. Even like Tinkle may like you see this Dub Dub character. So that always used to like attract me towards all these animals, especially crocodiles and all. And slowly it started to come up more. And then I think it was in 96 or 97. So it was a trip to Madras Crocodile Bank. And there I was like, oh my God, what a place. So there it all kicked in much more. And then like I got some very basic books and all on identification. And in those times, like books were very hard to come by. We didn't have like so many wildlife books written, especially like colored photograph books and all. So there was this black and white book that I got from Madras Crocodile Bank, is to go through all the snakes and photographs of them. So it slowly started like that. It was Snakes of India, like it's a black and white version. And the funniest part was I thought that is all the snakes that actually India has, and it's all in that book. So that was the perception that this is all. Yeah. So and then I got another very little book from there only, like Turtles Around Us or something like that. So it started then, and I started looking for more books. So then there was one shopping mall over here, which even shopping malls were not also very common at that time. So then there was a bookstore, Oxford, and then another one I'm forgetting. So over there, whenever I used to see anything on snakes, lizards, or anything, so I used to try and save some money and buy those books, because these were like, all books, imported books, and they used to cost a lot of money. And there was no Amazon or like Flipkart, or where you could easily like get books. So things were hard, but still like I started off from there.
Which year is this, and what was your age?
So this would be somewhere around 99, 2000.
99, 2000. Yeah. So yeah, continue.
Yeah. So then, like, I got my, like, my relatives, like, they got to know, okay, like, I'm into snakes and all that. I love, like, looking at them. I used to visit the zoos, and I used to stay, like, I used to tell all my friends in school, they would like, bunk classes and go to movies, and I would go to the zoo. So, and like, I'll spend my time like, watching the crocodiles and the snakes in the enclosures, hours and hours and hours. And anybody who accompanied me, like, they used to go crazy on that, okay, like, ab to yahan se nikle, and I would never go from there.
So what was your age then?
So I was around 19 or 20 at that time.
Okay, so now you are almost above 40, right?
40, yeah.
Oh,
not
so
above,
I just
I
calculated. Yes. Tell me.
You're not far behind, Joy.
So yeah, please continue.
Yeah. So then it all started, and my father was never like liking this thing, like my inclination towards snakes and all that. So he was kind of very scared of like all that. So then what happened is I grew this interest to that extent that I was looking around every corner, like to go through books, or like to get into touch with people who are working with this thing. And slowly it happened that I started getting rescue calls. So my first rescue call, if I remember correctly, it was somewhere around 2001. So it was in my at my uncle's place. So they had this small courtyard kind of a place, and they were all bricks kept over there. So the first thing that happened is like when they gave me a call, I was so excited. So it's just 3 or 4 kilometers from our old place. So I went over there, and then the first thing that I did was like I asked him like how does the snake look, because I think that came very naturally to me, because though I have worked with a lot of animals, but there's no shame in telling that I'm scared of snakes, because I know like what they can do. And I think this much of fear is very much important in everyone's life, because otherwise you tend to make more mistakes. So that was always there, and I didn't actually rescue the snake. So what I did, I carried that Romulus Whittaker's book with me, and I was sitting in a chair in front of that brick pile, and whenever the snake would put his mouth out, so like I would like go through the book and try to tally the snake with the snake's pictures in the book. So then I like identified that's a checkered quillback with the 2 eye mark and all. So this is how I have learned. There was no one to teach us like what scalations are, and like how you actually taxonomically identify a snake, or like
before you met me.
Much before I met you. Much before I met you. Much before
no one to tell you said you. That's why I corrected you.
Yeah. True. Yeah. So that's how it all started, and things started falling in place. But one thing was, I never thought that I would have a career in this. It was just a part of something that I like doing. So that's how like it all started.
Tell me, like you must have some role model, because all the linear entry may not have a role model, because they were like in the stream, going through MSc, going to PhD, some subject they may not have a role model. But since you are from a totally different field and you went to, so there should be some role model that you had in mind and you were fascinated.
So actually, So actually, there was no like role model as such. But in West Bengal at that point of time, you must be very well knowing that there was a Calcutta Snake Park over there. So late Mr. Deepak Mitra, who was the owner of the Calcutta Snake Park. So anybody who would like want to see snake and want to work with snakes, so he or she was always referred to that person. So like that's how like I used to visit this snake parks and all that. In a sense, like, and then like I started meeting more people who really guided me through. Like I can name a lot of them, and I'm glad that I'm still meeting so many people like even at this point of time, who are showing me new avenues. So Colonel Banerjee, Shakti Ranjan Banerjee, Arjun Da, Bikram Da, there's so many of them. They have helped us through, showing us the different pathways and how to go about things. Like Arjun Da has got he has one of the milestones that I have in my life. He's been very supportive all throughout. So that's it.
Arjunda, yeah, but he should be like wood, not stone, because stone sinks and wood floats. So Arjunda should be a wood in your journey of life.
Yeah, but then you need some anchorage also, right?
Okay, great. So tell me one thing, we were too much concentrating on snake at this point of time, but I want to know in this whole perspective, like the emotional touch, like to rescue an animal. See, to do a scientific research, you may not need an emotional touch. You have to do a work, and because you had this touch, emotional touch with animals, that you started rescuing, and also at certain point of time you started taking care. Even in I heard that you took care at some of the animals, maybe in zoo, and maybe under the
Very
guidance
rescue
of
centers. Yeah, yeah.
nurses. So how come that bonding, and which animal is the one that you love the most among all those?
So I think this bonding and attachment with any animals, I think it comes from the environment that you're actually being brought up into. So my mother was always telling us good stories about animals, not to hurt animals, and if I would when I was a kid, when I would throw a piece of stone to a baby dog or something, so I would get scolded, and I would be told if somebody would have hurt you like this, your mother would have been very hurt. So that animal's mother is also being hurt because you're behaving that way. So I think this kind of things repeatedly learned taught us the compassion towards the animals. So it was a kind of a learning that I think helped me through the family guidance that I got. I'm very thankful for it. That I was brought up like that.
So now when I am looking into in 2020, when rescue is animals are straying off more than ever before, and in ratio to that, there are so many rescuers, animal rescuers are there in the field. And now with more people, there are more good rescuers are there, but there are some rescuers who are not up to the mark, or ethically not up to the mark. So now I want to know, that is a very serious aspect of this discussion, that what is rescue and when to rescue.
So I think it's again all into the kind of environment that you're growing up in. So that really helps, and to some extent your common sense and how much you can use your brains to work things out. That you just if you want to do a rescue for the sake of rescue, then I think you tend to lose things in a way. But if you think about it, that why should I rescue, and where the animal belongs, because I have seen pictures, I've seen people rescuing animals from the forest, or a bird has fallen down behind a tree, and that was a fledgling, so probably its parents were actually feeding the bird over there, and people were oh my god, they rescued it. I have seen people rescuing snakes from the mouth of a jungle cat. So if you are blind enough, if you cannot think beyond, and you should have a broader sense, so then things falter. So I always tell people, I also started as a rescuer at some point of time. So whoever comes to me, I just tell them only one thing, that you should always ask a lot of questions to yourself first. And now it is so much easier that in various groups there are so many good guidance with videos and all that, how to safely rescue the thing. So the main motive of the rescue is to give the animal that much of space so that it can get back into the wild. It is not your private property that you bring it home and keep it. It is not you have to understand where you're rescuing the animal from. Does it actually belong there? If it belongs there, then it belongs there. So, and then and these things are not written down rules. So situation wise things change, but you have to be very much cautious about how you're doing things. And let me tell you something. Like you may have like 1 lakh followers, I may have 1,000 people who's following me, but there are people like following us. So it is about taking responsibility about those people. So if you want to be a rescuer, you be a rescuer. You don't need to be a researcher, but be that rescuer that everybody will talk about. Whenever people give good examples of rescuers, then they will give examples of you. So that is how one should go about it.
So, like for example, if there is a circumstance, like many people, for a day-to-day common people are very afraid of wildlife animal in their property. So that's a big problem. Now, how do because they want, if there is even a smallest rat in their property, they want the rescuer to take it somewhere and release it. Now the question would be how to convince this. What is the rule of thumb to convincing these people? Because here you have to have a very good PR. So how do you do this?
So actually, I think we also face the similar kind of questions, because the love for animals that I have, or like XYZ has, I cannot expect that the person would be having similar kind of a compassion for that animal. Like I don't have a tiger straying into my courtyard, so I can sit over here and tell, "Nahi, nahi, nahi, let's go, like रहने दो वहाँ पे." So it doesn't work that way. So it's depending on your personal skill level and how you convince people. And there are times that you've got to take a step back and like let the people understand that this is okay. Let this animal be there. But what if in case of venomous snake? So like the snake was probably there forever. It's just that on that particular day it came out and people saw it. So these are the situations that you have to take a drastic call, maybe like remove the snake or release it somewhere else. But then I have experienced that many people whom I convinced, and they let the venomous snake be there. And for non-venomous snakes now it's more easier. Yeah.
So tell me one case study so that people can understand what was a bit of, I know you will not have the transcript of the conversation, but a bit of what you told them. That is what we want to know.
Yeah, so in mostly the in Kolkata and adjoining region, we do not have many venomous snakes. It's mostly Russell's viper and monocle cobras. So there was one incident where one monocle cobra was stuck in a fish net, and it was in Baruipur area. So it's around 18 kilometers from our place. So we went over there. And there was a lot of crowd as usual. So after we rescued the snakes, the owner of that property, so he wanted us to take the snake away. And I generally will not take a snake anywhere else and release it. Either if I have to take it elsewhere, then I just hand it over to the forest department. So otherwise, I'll make sure that I release it over there. So the main thing is you have to tell the good things about the snakes over there and how people can avoid it. And so I convinced him that this particular snake, just because it was a big cobra, so I said it just didn't crop up from anywhere. So it probably lived over there for long enough to be over here, and the good things that it would do for his well-being. It took a bit of time to convince him, and I told him that I promise you that if I release this snake over here, near the pond, you will never see it again. That's one bait. Luckily the snake didn't show up in the next day or something. So then he somehow agreed to it, and he released it. And now when he gets a snake or anything, so he sends me the photographs, today I saw this particular snake and it is in its own habitat and all that. So people also change. Yeah, it's not that every case gives you a fruitful result, but people do change. It's just that we never tried to convince them.
So tell me a bit that many of this, since you have some basic expertise and you carried on with rescuing snake and all, but many new youth, they are a little bit crazy at initial, that many of us were, but luckily we were not. Actually, we are afraid, we can say, so that we did not take that extra bit of risk. So many of them are now very, they are ready to take extra bit of risk. So and there are many deaths in case of snake. Many rescuers died because of snake. Now, before we deal with ethics, tell me a bit about legal implication. For example, I am a common person. Suddenly, I go and rescue a snake. So, what are the legal procedure if, God forbid, or if my luck is bad, what are the legal procedure that I may get entangled by rescuing a snake without prior information to our forest department or anything like that?
So technically, uh, see, there are two ways to it. One is like something which is legal may not be ethical, and one something which are like ethical may not, or like unethical may be legal. So there's a thin line between it, and you've got to like understand that. And it is obviously like the Constitution tells us that we should be compassionate towards the animals, but Constitution is not
Correct.
law,
Hmm.
right? So I think like then if your mens rea, like if your thought is to for the saving the animals, I don't think like anybody should cause any trouble to you. But in that case, you have to work that with that ethics, where people know that okay, you're not taking the snake anywhere else because you're not supposed to carry a scheduled animal like that. So the best possible thing that I have always done is like I've always informed the department, and I've got like loads of help from and support from the department. And till date, I get it like from Assam or like all over West Bengal and all. So the you build up liaison. You like it's not only about if you want to do it for a longer period of time, you should have you should build that good relationship with the local forest department and the local people. And then whenever you get a rescue call, you inform the forest department. That's what I generally do. Most of the cases, like maybe forest department doesn't have that much staff strength, so like they are unable to go. But then like with their instructions, I will go, I'll release the snake, I'll take a video of that, of the whole thing, and I'll send it to the concerned officer. If in case that I have to bring back that snake for some reason, I'll also inform that.
Hmm.
Or like ask the suppose sometimes the forest department rescue center is far off, and you're unable to go. You inform them that this is with me, the snake has been rescued, I'm unable to release it, and you pick it up from my home, and you maintain a data sheet of that.
So, since see, I am talking about now. I am talking about a worst case scenario. Most of the rescuer are really they are compassionate about this. But what about because a common person, some village you go there or peripheral cities, peripheral area, and they are happy when you take the snake away. They do not follow up with it because they have no relation with it. So now I start doing something which is not very legal. Like I rescue the snake, but start keeping them in my home through a period of time that I know that many may have involved in such type of activities, and
True.
throughout different states, different cities, these there are certain group who will do this. So my question is, what would be the like in certain cases some strict measures are taken? What would be the penalty?
So if it depends on like what the species is. So like for per se like if it's mostly like the venomous species like the cobras or the rhesus viper or the rat snake for that matter. So they fall under the Schedule 2 Part 2 of the Wildlife Protection Act. So you must be aware of that we have got like certain schedules. So this is which lists a number of animals which are like protected under certain of this list, and the punishments are for disturbing or like hunting or trapping or like anything of that sort will get certain amount of punishments. So if it falls between Schedule 1 or Schedule 2 Part 2, which I said, so they have got equal amount of punishments. So it's like up to 3 to 4 minimum 3 years to 7 years of imprisonment. And if it's in Assam has got amended their Wildlife Protection Act. They have like an amended one, so it's much higher in Assam actually. So the minimum punishment starts with 7 years. So you're gonna be into a thick suit. And not only that, what happens is like this kind of news generally does not stay inside that you're keeping snakes. It's gonna go out through a word of mouth here and there. So what is happening is at the end of the day, you're demeaning your reputation as a rescuer, and you will not be like called in any way. You will be always looked down upon because now people are getting much more aware. I give a simple example. 10 years, 12 years back, if you would have posed with a cobra in your hand, And like, whoever you are, I don't care, like, what big shot you are. People used to go like, oh, wow. Now, if you see anybody doing that, the response is completely the other way around.
And
I give that,
unfortunately,
yeah.
and unfortunately, those people who started that trend actually respond against now.
Yeah, but yeah, in some cases, yes. But then, like, it's better that the things have changed. Because if those people would have still continued that thing, then we would have been in a much deeper problem. So it's a good thing that people have realized they've corrected their mistakes, and they are trying to spread the right message to the new people. So that's very important. So that is like, I give it to especially Jose, like, who's managing the snake by Indian snakes and all that. So they have done wonderful awareness work in this regard. So they have got like, good amount of presentations, videos for all. So it's about educating the mass that you want to rescue animals, but do it as ethically as possible, keeping yourself safe and the animal.
Okay. So since we have, so you told me that we next part will go to the more serious thing like rehabilitation, relocation of rescued, because I think that has even more implication in conservation. So before we go that, you told me that you have some slides or all that you could show us that can help us a bit.
So rescue rehabilitation, in the sense, I can tell you something. Let me share it.
Okay,
So
you just take
basically,
your
let me
time.
just-
No problem.
Yeah, so let me just basically go like take you through the thing. So first is like, why to rescue? That question should be there. Then, like, in today, like, everybody has got equipment. So use as many equipments as possible, right? Carry them with you all the time when you're going out on a rescue, because that one day when you are not carrying this equipment can be the doomsday. So first of all, like, if I have to tell you the situation wise, so there's like, suppose you get a rescue call, right? So the first thing is like what to do before reaching the rescue site. So if I have a rescue call, so first thing what I would be doing is like, I would be like, taking that call, calmly listen, like, what is exactly happening, right? And then I have to study the situation over phone, that okay, fine, so there's a snake. Where's the snake? Where is it? There is it moving around? Is it like, sitting elsewhere? So you try to draw a picture, and of course reassure the caller that not to disturb the snake, just to keep a like distance and keep a watch on the snake. And you record the addresses and everything, and then you please emphasize that no one should go and attempt to kill or capture the snake. This is sometimes this happens. And also you must tell that if you're they had called the forest department people or you, so what happens is like people get scared and they keep on calling you. You're not coming. It's like that it's you're taking a lot of time. So you have to make them understand that also, that it's far away, and even maybe you're out on some other work also. So that has to be there. And first of all, if it's in a resting position, if the snake is in a resting position, nobody should go and disturb the snake. So this is like what you can talk through before you reach the site. Next one is on-site activity. So first is like you always instruct the people to clear the area. Ensure that proper lighting is available, and you're carrying your own lights and sets of equipments for that. So don't depend on like somebody else is carrying light for you, or maybe there might be lights or torches available over there. That's it. Before you put the snake into the bag or with the equipments, check your bag that it's foolproof. So before you leave for the rescue, it's better you check all your equipments, right? Then assess the situation. That do you now feel that it needs to be rescued? Because sometimes what happens, a snake is just on the backyard of a house, which is a part of a jungle or like a forested area. So you can just go over there, take a call on that, and you can convince the people that it will go away, or you can shoo it away, right? And always try to work in pairs. Do not try to go avoid going to a rescue spot alone, for two reasons. one, if God forbid you are a very safe rescuer and if some problem happens, like at least you will have someone who knows about snakes and who knows about like snake bites will be able to help you out from there. Number two is there should be someone to control the crowd, right? And while rescuing, your concentration and whole of your concentration should be on the rescue part of it, not that to like taking videos and talking on mobile phones. Even if whatever important call comes at point of time, you're not receiving that. So and then the things to remember after that is like, do not attend any kind of rescue call under the influence of any kind of drug or alcohol. There have been incidents we have seen on Facebook that people were like under the influence of some kind of a drug or something, and they went for a rescue, and the worst thing happened. Right? Do not free handle venomous snakes, but I would rather say like do not free handle any snakes, at least on that particular snake, because that gives the wrong idea to people. So people don't understand like whether which one is a venomous snake and non-venomous snake. So they'll try to do that and may mistake a rat snake for a cobra, or a cobra for a rat snake for that one. That would be a little mistake. And your release should be as fast as possible and nearer the spot of rescue. So that's very important, right? Another thing is try to catch the snake like as safely as possible. Best is like if you can develop a technique where you don't need to actually touch the snake, and like this touching of the snake should be like kept to the minimum. For bagging and especially for releasing, you generally don't need to like like touch the snake. You just have a good bag with loops and you can release it back to the right area. So touching and holding and catching of the snake should be kept to the minimum. Number three, get acquainted with the first aid procedures of snake bite. So this is, and for newer rescuers, treat unidentified snakes as venomous. Anything you cannot identify on spot, you are a newer rescuer, you don't know many snakes, treat them as venomous. So this is like what I have been doing. I've tried my best to follow these protocols, and so far I have not been tagged. Touch wood.
So so many people underestimate the snake bite importance of snake bite. I take a little bit. I want to add to you that snakes are not very well known or respected in Indian society, at least. So the person who is rescuing snake, from my experience, I see the rescuing snake, they go out of the way. Their family members, as you say, are not happy with them. But somehow he slowly convinces his family member. As a result, his family members slowly start having a bonding with the snake. Similarly, his friend, followers, neighbors all start becoming acquainted with snake for good. But that fellow, if suddenly dies of a snake bite, the whole chain, positive chain he created, immediately will turn into, and that all the people now will search and seek snake to kill.
Yes. So all that work that you have done, it's like gone. And I have seen people like who've been like bitten multiple times. They'll go like, no, I've been bitten so many times. So that is, I sometimes say like, would you like to keep a driver for yourself, like, who has met with like millions of accidents and tells them like, no, I have got a good experience of
beautiful.
Yeah. So I would.
You do not know you are bitten means you do not know your work.
Yeah, you still might get. See, when you're working with animals, but
you should not take pride. You should not take pride for being bitten. You lack your expertise. Yes.
Yeah. So, exactly. Tell me.
So, because I was coming back to that question, because people underestimate, because if they are not exposed to snake bite or a patient with snake bite, they do not realize the trauma and pain the people taking care for that snake bite patient go through, like not only physical, mental trauma. So before we go to the next point, can you just elaborate that one story you told me of Sundarban guy who was bitten, and the next time you called, he was not picking the phone, somebody else picked the phone.
Yes. So this is about Joydeep. So what had happened is like, so he was working with one of the very renowned like group of people who are like very good rescuers. But then, like, it's again, like, I told you, like, the people who you idealize, and if they don't have that ethics to work properly, then what happens is, like, they're not taking the responsibility of the people who are following them. So it's something like similar happened with Joydev. And Joydev was rescuing snakes quite often, and unfortunately he would rescue the snake, and you would, like, keep the snake for 5 days, 7 days in his place. So before this incident happened, maybe, like, 8 months from that black day. So I was in Sundarban, and I met him, and I went to his place also, and I saw, like, common crates and everything, kept in a box. So I said, like, what are you doing with them? Because you got a small kid at home, and crates are, like, excellent escapers. So they can escape at any point of time through any, like, gaps and holes and all that. So he would say, it's just there, like, I'll study them and I release them. So I said, if you're studying them, like, what are you studying? Like, where are the notes? And with whose permission you're keeping it for such a long period of time? So he would, like, no, Dada, it's like that. So I said, okay, no, it's better to be a old rescuer than a bold rescuer, Joydev. So that's what I told him. And he was kind of quite reckless, because, he would rescue the snake and then, like, maybe show the fangs and everything. This is very common. In my entire life, I didn't even, like, dare to do that, because I'm not, like, going to work with venom and all that I need to do that. So I like, I can show millions of photographs on internet to the people that, okay, snakes have fangs and this look like this, but I don't need to do that with a live snake on my hand, because accident will happen on that one particular day. So try and avoid all that. So anyways, so already Joydev had been bitten by a rhesus viper while doing a show of that sort. And then probably he had rescued another snake, and which he came to release somewhere. And again, like, people probably asked him, what is it? And because it was a small cobra, so he just took it by his hand or something, and he got tagged. But he didn't tell it to anyone. He didn't tell it to anyone. So, like, somehow I got the news that probably he has been, bitten, but he wouldn't tell it anyhow to me also. So I just said, are you sure? He said, no, it's a false alarm. I've not been bitten. So I spoke with him for 2-3 like, hours later also. Like, he said, no, I'm on, like, going back home and everything is fine. And then 8 o'clock I call him, and somebody else picks up the phone. I said, where's Joydev? And he said, he's no more. So in that situation, first of all, he rescued the snake in his village. He went all the way to another place which is far off to release the snake. So this was the first basic thing that I didn't understand, why he would do that. And again, like, the bite happened while he was showing people that venomous snake. So if he would have just even rescued it and released it also from the bag, he would have been there with us today.
So Anirban, tell me one thing. I don't know if you'll agree with me, but I also, in my level, try to tell people that, frankly speaking, I openly I say here that if between I want maybe I should not say that, but I'll tell you that I love human, and I think whatever may it be, but human, my friend should survive amidst all this thing, even in the worst case scenario between snake and my friend. So I may be totally so that is my thought process. But have you seen this, some of the rescuers, they are so good rescuers and they are so valuable. See, we researchers are not that valuable for society because we are directly not doing some service to society. It is very indirect. Even if we don't do something or describe new species, doesn't matter. But some of the rescuer, I fail to make them understand the risk and the benefit, because we all in life take some calculative risk. Even maybe you are traveling by a plane, there is even if you are traveling by a car, even in a busy street you are crossing the road, you are taking a risk, but that is a calculative. But here there is, the risk is only having negative things, no positive outcome. So showing snake, handling snake without any reason, and then they, so but then they are so passionate, like I'll say the word, like they are like drugged. They are like, at one point of time they love you, they listen to you, you love them, but once they see the snake, it's like something they have, matha mein kuch chad gaya. So have you
So
found
what is the difference between that is where, like, I think I can take this very nicely. So it's the difference between love and lust. Right. So what you just said is lust. They like, glorify it as love for animals, but it's not love for animals. If you really love an animal, you would love to see them back in nature. No animal, wild animal especially, loves to be touched unnecessarily. Right? He's not used. That particular animal is not used to it. So if you really love that animal, you wouldn't do that to that animal. Like, I know some of the rescuers from various states who would kiss the animal. Why? I mean, who are you to do that? And why would you do that? So, and
Yeah,
what the pleasure, what sort of, like, machoism, like, they get out of it. So, and then what happens one day? The accident happens, and when the accident happens, not only that the family loses a bread earner, it has happened in a lot of cases. Also, I'll tell you that, that suppose you got a kid, and when you're doing rescues and bravery you're showing, then everybody is like, okay, his father is a rescuer, he holds snakes like this and that. When you die of a snake bite because of your recklessness, the same people will tell, like, no, his father died of a reckless snake bite, his father used to try to be a hero. So that is what your kid is going to go through for the rest of her life or his life. So it is about taking responsibility. If you either you don't do it, or if you do it, you do it in the right way. Because one, you're, like, getting yourself into trouble, you're getting your family into trouble, and you're buying a very bad name for all the snake people, all, like, who are good rescuers also. So a lot of responsibility lies with these people, and they have to change or stop it, because somebody else will do a better job. You can go home and sit.
So, since we have discussed ethics of rescue, we have discussed procedure of rescue, we have taken a case study on snake bite, wrong rescue procedure. Now we will come to the next challenging topic. That What about relocation and how successful India is in relocating its animals?
See, there is, very little study on what happens to all that animals that, which are, like, rescued and then released far off, and this thing. So all that studies suggest only one thing in common, that every animal, even snakes, have their home ranges. Like, and they try to come back, like large snakes like pythons and king cobras. There have been, like, much good studies, which suggest that yes, they try to come back to the same spot, like, where their territory is, and on the way they might perish if you, like, release it. Another thing is, it's very common that any animal which has got a territory will also have, other snakes in that area where it is being newly released. So it will probably, like, have some conflict in that zone also. And once you start, taking snakes out of particular region and start releasing it elsewhere on a period of, like, 15 years, 20 years down the line, the ecological balance is bound to get shifted. Or, like, if you do that with especially non-venomous snakes, maybe a venomous snake will take its place in that particular niche. So easy part is you rescue the snake and release it elsewhere, and the hard part, which is always, like, will always have a long-term good effect, is to convince the people to coexist. That is the only solution to snake problems. Snakes would get killed. You cannot stop killing of snakes. But if snakes would have actually, like, lost their population only because of human killing, they would have been extinct all by now. But it's more because of, habitat loss and, like, the food pattern that has changed. All these things are also there. So they are, like, living on the very edge. So that much we can do, I guess.
So now I go to another number game. So I am, like, too much confused. Like, some people will say I have rescued 5,000 snake. So like, and then you just divide it, and somehow I divide it, and per day I try to club it with per day number, and it's way more than we can anticipate. So I have also done rescue in my own way. Every year I am doing some rescues, but I hardly know the numbers. Do you know your numbers?
No. I
So
only know my phone number. But
how
even if I remember, it's not 5,000. Actually, see, it depends like which part of the country you are in. So if you're in a mostly forested area and all that, during the high snake seasons, like during the monsoon times and all that, you might get like 6-7 calls in a day. Like I've seen that happening, but I don't never tried counting like that way. And
So,
I think I'm nowhere close to that number, anyways.
haha,
I'm any case like no way close to that numbers that you were talking about.
no need. So if you don't need to rescue, and you can just convince people, so your number will not go up, but your work will
Yeah.
go up. Your contribution will be high.
Yeah.
So
Much higher, much higher.
much higher, much higher. So tell me, we are like too much restricting our. In between, I'll tell everyone that we have already got some questions, and if you have more questions, please put in, and please shoot, because we are like 15 minutes left for the program to end, and you can always ask some relevant question regarding wildlife schedule, rescue, rehabilitation. Now I'll come to this. We have
I
talked a
just would
lot of.
like to add one thing to that, Jayaditya. So for every rescuer, it is always there's a room for improvise it and make it much more safer. So that should also be always in your mind, that how can I make the next rescue better, much more safer,
Hmm, hmm, hmm.
and you spread the message. So it's like a water ripple effect. Somebody sees you doing a good rescue, you're he'll start following you. So I think that is a responsibility every rescuer has to take.
Hmm, hmm. True. So since we are converging too much, or we are too much into snakes, so tell me a bit about other animals that generally gets rescued. Maybe some birds, some mammals.
So in my context, I'll show you some of the animals that we have rescued over the last 10, 12 years.
Yes.
So yeah, I'll just share this screen.
Okay. And all of you, please, if you have question, please write.
Can you see my screen, Jayaditya?
Yeah, I'll share it. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So because it's like COVID-19 time, so let me start off with bats.
Hmm.
So we have raised bats, and I must tell though I do a lot of rescue, but it is Arpita, my wife's actually contribution to raising them up. So she has always been there with me regarding all this rescue and rehabilitation, and because rescue is one part of it, and then there's a whole long journey to raise this animal up without much imprintation or like of yours onto him, so that it can be easily released back into the wild. So these are the common wildlife that we come across in our area in Kolkata. This is one of my favorites. So can anybody tell what it is?
Okay, wait. We don't answer it. Place it here and let somebody answer it. We can come back to this.
The people who know us, not the Kolkata people who know us.
Okay, so anybody, also we can open it for Kolkata people, no problem. We can always answer the question. We'll come to the next one now.
Any answers?
No, not now. You just move on to the next slide. Yeah, somebody.
Okay. Yeah, so the moment we move on to the next slide, like people gonna understand anyways.
Okay, so anyway, just move on.
Yeah, so this is a civet baby, which is this
Oh,
so small.
King Shuk answered it. That is in civet.
Yeah, I knew he would come up with that anyways. Yeah, so this is how it starts. I mean, this is has his eyes opened up, and we start off with like this, and then this is at 1.5.
Whose hand it is?
So that's Arpita.
Ah, Arpita, beautiful nails.
Yeah.
Clean. Yeah.
And then we start giving them different diets of fruits and some non-vegetarian like chicken, meat, and all. And then comes the day of the release. So before the day of the release, what happens is we try and teach them as much as possible about the place that they are going to go back to. So we start making them climb trees and all that. So in this regard, we first rescued our first batch of civet babies way back in 2011. So then, that is how when I got a lot of help from a lot of people like Sanat Mulia, who was a veterinarian doctor at that time in Banerghatta Zoo. He helped us through. Even I met Arindam over the phone regarding that, Dr. Arindam Kishore at Guwahati Zoo now. So we have got a lot of help throughout all this process. So a lot of people now call us as the civet people, and then there are some we have rescued jungle cats also. But I would especially like to show you that all the animals that we get are not always in a good condition. So this particular jungle cat came in a very, very, very bad condition. This is at the Forest Rescue Center. So it had some kind of infection all around its face. So it was regularly dressed and treated and all that. And the right hand corner, what you see is this is how it cured, and it was released back into the wild. We try as much as possible to soft release. So that's another aspect of working with mammals. For birds, this kingfisher fell into a pit of tar. So it had all sticky feathers and everything. So it was also successfully done. Not all rescues end up with a successful result. I must tell you this also, but you must not get disheartened by that. Try and get in touch with as many vets as possible. Now with Facebook being an open forum, you can get in touch with good people who have good experience in working with animals. So you should always take a support of veterinary support. This mongoose babies were orphaned, and they came to us in 2012. So there goes mongoose, and this you would love, Jayaditya. This is your sparrow. So we got when we have rehabilitated many sparrows, and most of them stay around our home only. So they're released.
Anirban, just a minute. I see lots of many hands, and most of the hands are of Arpita.
Yes.
So I request Arpita, because many of the viewer may be interested to know who this Arpita is. So Arpita, if you are seeing online, I am sending you a link. You can just join at the now. You can join because we have 10 minutes left. So please join us, and the talk will be even nicer, and we can extend a bit. I'll just check it out. So Arpita, feel free. I am sending you the link. Please join us, and it will be fun. Okay. Yeah. Continue.
So this is we got this one without the feathers and everything, and this is how slowly it was ready for first flight. So this was a really good experience, memorable one, and this is there were a couple of squirrel babies. So when they came, they just were very, very small, and again Arpita took the lead in that. So it depends of how we raise the animal. We try to handle it as less as possible, especially mammals like jungle cats and civets and all that. Sometimes it's very tiring, because when a very small baby comes, so it needs to be fed very often. So that is a tedious job. So it starts from say 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. So there have been days when we had a sparrow baby, a squirrel baby, one civet baby, a dove. So it was like a 5-star hotel kitchen starting at 6 o'clock in the morning. So every animal would have a different diet, and we will run to the market, we'll get the right kind of things for them, and and then repeated feeding all through the day. So sometimes it's really tiring. It takes a lot of toll. So it's not about fun. It's not very glamorous. It feels good, but it's a lot of hard work. If you really want to do that thing, you've got to be ready for this. It's not only about just rescuing and releasing. It's it's a long process. If I talk about
so in between, when I visited in Kolkata, you were taking care of maybe 60 turtles. That 60. That was red star tortoise. I remember
that was Lysimus punctata, I believe.
Lysimus punctata was there, and then there was lots and lots of star tortoise.
So that was in 2014.
You told that your hands are like you are just cutting down carrots and all,
Yeah,
maybe something.
yeah. So and then again in 2018, so we were working with Wildlife Trust of India, like so as a rehabilitation program, and I must say I learned so much from Abhishek Narayan, and so he was also over here. So we had almost 200 star tortoise rescued.
Wait, so I see the lady has joined. Arpita is here. So the we already only saw hands. Now the whole person is here. Hi, Arpita. Tell me some. Anirban, can I just cut you off and take some
Yeah,
point, and then we'll
surely,
get,
surely, anytime, anytime, anytime,
and then we'll let go of Arpita. So Arpita,
anytime.
please say something of your experience raising babies.
Network is very bad.
It doesn't matter. So tell me, can you hear me?
No, I think the network is quite bad over there.
So anyway, Arpita, I have to let go of you because the
Hi.
network is not good. But yeah.
I think the show was.
The network is not good over there.
Okay.
Can
So
you hear
anyway,
us?
The network is very bad. I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
okay. Anyway, so bye bye. I just wanted to meet the lady whose hand was visible. So I wanted to show and see the face. Take care. Bye bye. So yeah, Anirban, continue.
Yeah. So then, there were almost 200 tortoises, star tortoises, which were rescued, confiscated rather, and it was a lot of work starting way up in the morning, and it's about cleaning the cages. It's about making sure that each one of them had got their medications. It's about whether each one of them is eating the food. You write it down that which is having and which is not. So they're all numbered. And then you have to grate almost 2.5 kilos of carrots in every half of the day. So there was a morning feeding session and evening feeding session. So it is not all that glamorous that you feel, but there's a really glamorous pleasure when you see them going back to wild and you want to do something that you have dreamt of. So be ready for the hard work because it's not that easy as it looks like from the exterior
Yes,
part.
yes, yes, true. So, since we are at the very end of the program, and we'll take some of the question or comments, and we can go through that, and let's see
Sure.
who has written what. So the first one says, Prashanna Kolita, hello sir, hello. King Shuk Mondol says hello. Urjunda says welcome. Okay. Devayon says hello. Kaku Shoikoya, Kaku from Kaziranga. Do you remember him?
Yeah. Nice to see you. Nice to see you.
Uh,
Long
yes.
time.
So Arjunda said poor network, but I think it's better now. Arpita said, please record this. So I did not know she thought that it will go public or not. Anyway, Arpita
No,
will do
actually,
some.
probably because the network is not good over there. So
Okay.
that's why.
Okay. Hi guys. Hello sir. Prasanna Kolita, we are fine. Momita di. Nazar said hi Anirban. And then
Questions.
or no, I'm just going through most of this, and
Oh, hi Anukriti.
Mohit. So Arjunda said, so they are all after your age. So anyway, Titir said something. Your story always give me goosebump. I go into a happy zone and get so excited. I am lucky to know you, and I started seeing Crocs in a different way after I met you. So you
My
want to
pleasure,
say
Titir.
something?
My pleasure, Nitin. And I'm really happy that she's also very dedicated with her work and the way she interacts with animals. Yeah, especially fulfully. I'm very scared of elephants. She deals it much better.
So Arpita said he is very young.
Yeah, at heart.
So
Yeah.
Anirbanda, please do share with us about how you would want the involvement in citizen in conservation.
Conservation cannot happen without involvement of citizens. So like there is no but this is my personal take, people might disagree, but I'm sure like not many would. So basically what I feel like, if you want to save a particular habitat or animals in that or whatever, we are always talking about saving the animals. I think the idea should be saving the habitat first. Not many are working towards that, because if you save say 1,000 animals, where would you keep them? They would not be having any home. So we need to be focusing more on saving their habitat. That's number one, and that cannot be done without the without the involvement of the people around that particular place, because they are the ones who will be sharing that place with these animals. So you have to involve them. So there could be various steps to do that. There could be awareness campaigns, personal relationships, and also what they will get out of it. That message should be very clear to them. So that's how it should go, and in what level you will do it, it's completely up to you. But yes, conservation without involvement of citizens and the people around, not possible. Oh, how's your rescuing going now? Hi, Loni. I must say, I'm very thankful that I met Loni because I learned a lot about crocodiles by little time that we had together. So fantastic human being. Maybe next time. Yeah. So hi, Navujit. So there's a catch in this one. So actually what happens is Jaditha, I can just, yeah. So what happens is what he says, rescuing is also hunting. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, technically, yes. And that's why I said the mens rea actually matters a lot. The law also have to be looked into that. When you're rescuing, you're actually catching an animal. And by the definition of hunting, it's not about only killing an animal. So if you look at section 9, for hunting, the definition, it includes even trapping, even if an animal is crossing a way and you're blocking its way, that is also hunting. So I'm sure many of us have done this thing, a snake is crossing and we stopped it and photographed it. So that also might come under hunting. So that's it. Yeah. After rescuing comes releasing the air. Most of us are on most of the cases. I think we have almost dealt with some of it. So it is obviously you should know which animal you're rescuing. Jaditha, are you there?
Yes.
Yeah. So you should obviously know what animals that you're rescuing and what its general preference of habitat is. So I would always suggest that preferably a diurnal animal should be released in the daytime part of the day, and a nocturnal would be released, should be released in its preferred habitat during that nighttime period, or just before the dusk and all. So I have seen a lot of people will take owls and they will release the owl in broad daylight. So you should know, it's rescuing is also about studying. And I must tell you that what rescuers are missing over here is they take a lot of data, some of them, but most of them don't. There's so much of natural history that they actually come across. And what we are missing at the moment is natural history. So write it down in your diary. I hardly come across rescuers who maintain a diary where they write their day notes. Because once in a while, if you don't write, you're going to forget. You're going to forget the dates when you saw the eggs. So I'll just show one thing at the end of it, how I maintain some of the things. Even when you're seeing a photograph in Facebook and I see that somebody has hatched some eggs, I write it down that, okay, this egg of this particular animal was found in this area of India by this person and it hatched after so many days. So I know, after 2-3 years of doing the same thing, I have more or less data of particular species like where they're like regionally their mating season is differing from what I see over here, and I can have a lot of data with me. So that's very important. Start writing. Can you post the clause here? No, I don't have it, but I can actually like share that hunting one. Yeah. How do you say framing a line introduction project in Kuna? What do you? I'm sorry, I won't be able to comment on that, Aditya. It's not my forte. So maybe Jayaditya sir would be a better.
Yeah, no, not at all.
Yeah.
King Shuk has a question.
Okay. I think Kinshu has raised this question once before, and let me see the question of Jayaditya once. Yeah, so as I've got on, the question is okay. Okay, Kinshu, here's the thing. So first of all, you're asking that why you are not able to see yellow monitor lizards in most of the time of the year, and then you are seeing them at a certain period of time, where you're getting to see Varana salvator and bengalensis more in your area. For that, you must read two things. One is you must get hold of Offenberg 1989 and Weiser 1985. I'll try and get you this thing. So that is what I'm talking about, that about natural history. So you will find your answers over there. So what they write over there is that generally it has been seen that this yellow monitor in the 1963s and all that, when the studies were being done, so it was thought that it lives in grasslands and all. But later on, it was found that it is not a grassland species, but it is mostly a marsh area species. It prefers marshy area, and it prefers to live in and around rice fields, right? Most of these rice fields are actually converted from marshlands, and so they are already starting to losing their habitat. Number one is this. Number two is it has been noted that between November to February, they are the least active species. Bengal monitor and water monitor are seen foraging all throughout the year, but it has already been documented. See, this is where natural history notes comes in, and your answer is there in all this, Offenberg 1989 and Weiser 1985, that they are more active during the month of June and July. So I'm sure you must be seeing them in your area still now in the month of June and July. Another part is like from June to October, they have been known to be more largely aquatic. So their behavioral pattern also changed between June and October because it's the mating season, flooding happens. So because they're the marshland species, they are like much comfortable being around this watery area. I think another reason why there is a decline in population of this yellow monitor in most of the areas is like, so there was a study done where out of 32 yellow monitors stomach content, it was found that 49% is amphibians. 40% is like frog, mostly rana species at that time, and 9% of toads. And then came like reptiles, egg, rodent eggs and all that. So we are also losing amphibians because of various pesticides and losing out of water bodies and all that. So I think your answer lies somewhere within all that thing that we have talked about, that why you don't see them. And so I'm sure like in coming years, if we don't save these habitats, you're going to lose seeing them even in the times when they're supposed to be more active, because
So
their
we take
habitat is changing.
we will take the next question. Please tell me some.
Yes.
So I think this question already has been discussed when we were discussing. So I will, because it was almost the same question, that how you do the things and all. So next question. Okay, there is one question.
Are Hitinda. One question: maximum rescue in the national Gulakra this thing, I think in Assam they are not been studying. So obviously it is necessary, but I really don't know how that study can be done with the kind of species that we generally come across, especially like the smaller snakes. Yes, but within it can, this kind of studies are very important. They have been done before, like I was talking about monitor lizards. So even in those days, if those studies could be done with much more technology available at this point of time, I think it can be done. Oh, thanks, Abhishek. Sorry you missed it, but you can get back to it later on. रुक मैं आता हूँ इसका आंसर देने. So it's on a hold, for a while. So maybe, I don't know when it's gonna come out. Can you translate that for me, please?
You can read. You read. I will translate it.
No, please don't make me read that. You do me the honest.
Because Bengali and Assamese are not very good with me, but you can read Bengali. That's why I'm asking you. Read. I'll translate. Manuhor babe prokriti aru ইয়ার পড়া
বন্যজীব মানুহৰ সংঘাত আৰু সংৰক্ষণৰ প্ৰয়োজনীয়তা, বন্যজীৱ সুৰক্ষা আইন আৰু উদ্ধাৰকাৰী উদ্ধাৰ সজাগতা আৰু সংৰক্ষণ উদ্ধাৰকাৰী সকলৰ কেৰিয়াৰ হ'ব পাৰে অত্যন্ত ভাতৰ.
Okay. He asking me is a very good valid question. Like he asked, if somebody takes rescuing as a career, so what, I have told them that many of the rescuer, they should to sustain the rescuing, there should be a model where they can sustain the whole thing, because you are burning your petrol. হেৰি প্ৰসন্ন ভাল প্ৰশ্ন, খুবেই ভাল প্ৰশ্ন, কিন্তু মই ইংলিছত কৈ আছো কাৰণ প্ৰথম কথা মানে আৰু মানুহে বুজি পাব. So I hope you will understand. মানে বস্তুটো এনেকুৱা হ'ল যে what he is asking is that what about career? So my question was, I told them I am spending my fuel. I am going to someone's home rescuing. And there are many who are not very well to do but still are in doing rescue. So actually, after, how will they get compensated? They are losing money, time, and effort.
So see, this is a thankless job. First of all, at this kind of scenario, we all started doing it from our own because we wanted to do something for the animals. But now slowly what has happened is things are getting recognized. It's just that things have not yet fallen into the system the way it should have been. So, but there are various NGOs who are working in collaboration with various forest departments and all that. And they have a rescue unit where they collaboratively are working with state departments. So maybe this kind of rescuers who are really good in that can really apply for all these posts where they can be a field assistant to all these things. And I think that would be a great career, because already in Assam you have WTI is working over there, TAC is also working over there. So there are various NGOs who have got this thing going on. So but for that you must become that ideal rescuer that we have been talking about. I know there's nothing called ideal, but still you have to be there. But there are opportunities coming up. Yeah.
So
yeah, thank you. Maybe later. I'll call you back.
But I am little confused about the black heart. It's because of smoking that you have black heart?
Who smokes? No one smokes. Smoking is bad.
Okay. So
next questions. Much needed. Nothing many of them. Oh, this is a very good question. So what happens, sometimes we reach a spot and we see that the snake has just started off eating an animal. So again, see, what happens is the situation to situation, it will vary actually. So if it's a small snake, say a cobra is feeding on a toad, so I would suggest that you be there make the people understand that it is having its food, let it have its food because it will not take much time, and wait for the snake to slither away.
Hmm.
But if it's a python and it's like, it's holding on to a goat, so then it's a different scenario because somebody's goat has died, and that python probably will take a lot of time to devour the thing. So if it's like already have devoured the thing and it's lying out over there, if it's possible to convince that people that okay, let it be over here for a while, and if you can rescue it a bit later, it's fine. Otherwise, in such situation, I've seen that it will regurgitate the moment you touch it, because that's it will empty itself out, and it will try to flee away. So these are the situations, these are extreme points where you can let a snake easily have its meal and let it go on its way. But with larger snakes, it's kind of difficult. And then you might have the crowd after you that mera goat kha liya. So because there's a poor man who has lost his goat. So it's very tricky. I mean, like, you have to be at the situation, have some experience to talk to people. Maybe you can save it, but I don't think you can make the python devour the goat and easily take it away. It will regurgitate. So these are some extreme situations where you have to go with it. Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. We miss you too.
So this is the last question of today.
And Shreya, do you think the should be considered relatively good in West Bengal and India, or So I don't know about the Indian context, but what I have read and what I've seen, Varanus bengalensis, similarly, it has got a very large range all throughout India. It really extends from South, Central India, the western part and eastern part. So by that, the Bengal monitor is much more, spread it all throughout, and because it is it is a forager, and it is a land dweller. So and its requirements are not very specific like the salvator population, which is which needs water bodies around it and all. So what I think both the species have taken a back step, a backseat, if you compare with some old observations. I'm sure it has happened to both the species, but I think Bengal monitor has got a better chance because it is more adaptive. But in places where there are salvator, I have seen they have adapted to that extent. Globally, salvator is much more spread out than Bengal monitor, that they are known to even have cooked food, like even sandwiches from tourists, and they are healthy. So their diet is very varied. So it's a win-win situation and lose-lose situation also at the same time, because they both of them have lost a lot of their turf, but I believe they are both of them are very adaptive animals. So Bengal monitor having a larger area, it should be able to withstand what the population decline compared to the restricted population of water monitor in India.
Okay.
Yep.
So we are going over time. So anyway, thank you, Anirban, that we had a brilliant talk. And all of you for being with us. Tomorrow we'll be coming with Shailendra Singh, Dr. Shailendra Singh, with turtles and crocodiles that we want to discuss. So it was a fun session, and tomorrow one I am looking forward to that as well. I will again have a fun session. So thank you all of you, and I'll take your leave. But the only problem that I could have increased the slot. The only problem is that the software that I am using, it's a limited version that is giving me 20 hours of live. So I have almost exhausted much. So I have to have some more interviews left to take. So thank you all of you. Bye bye. Every minute counts.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah. শুনো, তুমি থাকো।